I hit a really good question right before the show I wanted to get with you. Is a young lady named Shelly. Shelly says, Carmen, can I add debts that I forgot to include in my bankruptcy? And I don't know if we've touched on this in a while. I'm sure we've touched on it in the past in some shape or form, but this is a fantastic question. And it's something that we got two young ladies in our office who work on inputting it, Sue and Tracy, and they bang this into our clients' heads. You've got to get everybody in there at the time you file. In other words, we pull credit reports on everybody who files bankruptcy because it's that important. We also get them to give us every shred of paper that they may owe money to a creditor. So if you think you owe Uncle Bob $100 from 10 years ago, I'm still going to put Uncle Bob in the bankruptcy. Anybody who you think you owe money to. Granted, now let's say you have an old debt 3 or 4 years ago, you went to an urgent care and you just forgot about it. They never bill you. It's just forgotten. It happens. The question is whether you filed Chapter 7 or Chapter 13. And the reason why I'm saying it's important because in Chapter 7, you can get around this if you legitimately forgot to list a creditor. In our jurisdiction, we follow the line of thought that says in a Chapter 7, if it's a no asset case, meaning there's not going to be a distribution to the creditors. Basically, a person files, they pay nothing back, they keep their stuff, they go on about their life, they get their discharge, and life continues. In that type of scenario, a forgotten debt is included in the discharge. And people might say that's outrageous. Well, think about it. If you do not include that debt, that creditor never gets notice. And that's the creditor's argument. We didn't know about the bankruptcy. We weren't included. Therefore, our debt should not be included in that discharge. It should not get wiped out. But go back. Let's say we did give them notice. What would have changed? Would there have been, because we gave that creditor notice, would we have magically come up with some more money to pay them? No. I don't care if there was another $100,000 in creditors that weren't included. And again, I'm using that as a crazy example, but the reality is, in Chapter 7, the bankruptcy trustee is going to look for assets to distribute to the creditors. The bankruptcy trustee gets paid an enhanced fee to find those assets and give that money to the creditors. So they're on alert looking for anything they can possibly get out of the bankruptcy, out of the debtor to give it to the creditors. What's the difference if you have 100,000 of creditors in a case like that or 200,000? None of them are going to get any money. So the argument for me is that line of thought makes sense. There's another line of thought that says, well, if you weren't included in the Chapter 7, then your debt's not wiped out because you forgot to list this creditor and they didn't get notice. I'm less inclined to buy into that theory. In Chapter 13 is a huge difference. In Chapter 13, if you don't give that creditor notice, they don't have the ability to file a claim. Because they've lost that ability to file the claim, the bankruptcy code penalizes the debtor and says, you forgot to include them, their debt is not going to be included in the discharge. So in Chapter 13 cases, it's extremely important that you get that money, get that creditor listed so that they can file their claim and get paid whatever monies they're going to be entitled to. Now, normally it's not going to be a lot, but you still have to give them the opportunity to get their claim into the bankruptcy court. So, from that perspective, that was a great question about forgotten debts. Go back, has it ever happened? Sure it has. At least maybe once a year, a client will call us up and say, OMG, I forgot to include a debt. I'm so sorry, what do we do? We have to look back in our records and say, okay, was it a Chapter 7, was it a Chapter 13? Did this debt change anything? In other words, was it a no-asset Chapter 7? Well, if it was a no-asset Chapter 7, I'm just going to write a letter to that creditor saying, look, this person filed bankruptcy, your debt wasn't included, however, it was a no-asset Chapter 7, and here's the case law showing that this debt is included in the discharge. Please turn this over to your legal department or your lawyer and have them give me a call, and I'll explain it to them. So that's the way we normally handle it to wipe out that problem for that client going forward. So that's the way we handle it. That's the bottom line on forgotten creditors. My opinion is get them all in there. I don't care if you think you owe them $1, you owe them 50 cents, put them in there. If you don't owe them anything and you put them in there, what's the harm? They get notice you filed bankruptcy, whoop-de-doo, and the debt's going to still be wiped out no matter what.